I'm Jen Vitello, Content Marketing Director at Godfrey, and it's my pleasure to introduce Laura Patterson. Laura is the president of VisionEdge Marketing, a company that provides strategic marketing consulting and professional development services. She's one of the leading authorities in measuring marketing performance, data, and analytics, and is a speaker at conferences all over the country, most recently at Marketing Prof's B2B Forum in Boston. Today, she's going to be talking to you about what you need to know about your customers, where you can apply that knowledge, and how to measure those efforts to validate your marketing's impact. So let's welcome Laura.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Godfrey, Jen, and the BMA for having me. I'm really excited. This is my first time to this part of Pennsylvania. Beautiful. I hope I get a chance to get back here. So we're going to cover a lot of ground on how you sync content, channels, and the buying process. And as we all know, content is one of the shiny objects marketers are chasing today. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. So here's what I would like to be able to do. For a moment, just for a moment, let's let our imaginations go wild. So I'd like you just to envision, what if you could have your content resonate with your customers, right? How many of you think right now that you have content that resonates with your customers? Raise your hand. Wait, come on. You guys are really good at this. How many? Okay, very good. All right, so we're going to talk about that. That's really important. Second, you could actually match your content and the channels with your customer's buying process. How many of you think you're really doing that well right now? Really do a good job of making that match? Raise your hand. Let me just get a sense. A couple of folks? Good, because we're going to be looking to you as experts as we go through this process, right, to talk a little bit about what you're doing so you can share your expertise. And lastly, you could actually measure marketing's contribution, your contribution to the business beyond leads. And I want to talk a little bit about that because we have gotten into the world where we're all kind of enamored with the idea of generating leads. And that's really not our job. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you what our job really is in marketing. And it's not about just generating leads. And I will share a little story about that as we go forward. So a little bit about me. I've been doing marketing for a very long time. I was noticing one of our exhibitors has disco balls, keychains, very colorful, quite fun. I didn't take one because I already did the disco thing once, and once was enough for me. All right, so anyway, most of our customers are in the B2B space. We've been around for 16 years, and our passion is helping our customers be successful and grow, and to be able to use metrics, data, analytics, process and measurement to do that. And we've been around since 1999. And before that, so we've been around 16 years, I spent about 20 years actually doing the work in companies like Motorola and State Farm, that you might know those names, and then companies you've never heard of. Okay, so with that, let's kind of just get started. I want to welcome you to the age of the customer. So that's what Forrester is calling the period of time that we're in right now. We already know that customers are in the driver's seat, right? Because of what we've been able to do in terms of technology, everything is happening from the customer's perspective. So welcome to the age of the customer. It's here, and what we have to figure out is how do we engage with our customers the way they want to be engaged with. We only do 3 things in marketing. I want to remind all of us that. We do just 3 things, and we need to do them well. The first thing that we're expected to do is help our companies find profitable customers. That's the first thing we do. And if we're a brand new company, it's the only thing we do. But if we're an existing company, we're going to balance that in a moment. But we're still responsible for helping our companies find profitable customers. This is the process of acquisition, of which one component is maybe generating what we've become to call leads. But essentially, what we're really going to talk about is the acquisition process. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And it comes down to understanding what we are doing in terms of measuring our contribution to net new business. So when you think about your measures, we're going to be talking about metrics at the very end, and think about whether or not you're actually measuring your contribution to net new business. So one of our CEOs in an ingredient company, plastic additives, I've known him a very long time. He was a CMO in a former life at Honeywell. And what I like about Mike is that when I first met him, and we were talking about marketing many years ago, he said, really when I'm working with marketers and I'm in the role of marketing, I realize I'm responsible for one thing. Marketing helped me grow and prove to me that you did. So I hope you can carry forth that message. So that's Mike's message. The second thing that we're expected to do is, well, if we're going to find them, we have to keep them, right? So that's another key part of our job. And for many of us in marketing, because we've gotten kind of focused on the lead front end, we've forgotten that one of the key things we have to do is keep our profitable customers. So if we were having this conversation this morning, Michael and I, Michael Palmer, where are you? Where'd you sit? There you are. Hope you all get a chance to meet Michael from the BMA. Michael and I were having a conversation about how important it is to keep customers. In the case of BMA, keep members, right? You get members, they become part of your community, they renew, which is very important, right? They refer, which is very important, and all of that plays into the growth of your organization. So if you're looking at keeping your customers, you have to understand exactly how many you're keeping, which ones are at risk, and those that you are keeping, how are you looking at measuring their value. Okay, and then lastly, growing those customers. How do we grow them? So do we grow them? So in my days at Motorola, when I was selling things called semiconductors, one of the things that's really important is expanding our footprint inside the customer base, right? As well as securing more designs from the customers we were already doing business with. So very important things to remember. Okay, so with that, let's talk about that fact that the business of marketing is going through a transformation. I think this is a very important thing to understand. And what is that transformation? When I began in marketing all those years ago, marketing was about communication. How many of you have a title called marketing communication? Anybody in here have a title that has marketing communication? Okay, that was our business. When we first came into the world, we were in the world of marketing communication. Well, that has changed. And what we're in the world of business of doing today is experience. Our job is to create customer experiences. So we're moving from communication to experience. And how do we do that? How do we go from just blasting things out with content, right, to creating an experience? So let's talk about it. It's very complex, right? It's a very complex change because what we have are all these different touches that we have with a customer or a prospect, all these different channels that have now proliferated, right? So for those of us, we think about it, all the way from the first days of newspaper and print, to radio, to television, to email, to websites, to social, to mobile, all these different channels, and now all these different touch points, right? We've got video, we've got white papers, we have case studies, we have all different kinds of touch points, and now we want to add that to the customer buying journey. And so what we're really looking for is that intersection, that sweet spot, because there's so many interconnected parts. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is where do you and how do you get to that sweet spot? Okay, so I do want to tell you that some companies, some B2B companies are really good at this. And I want to tell you that this is not easy work, but there's a payoff for it. So let's talk about what the payoff is for the people who do it really well. I took this from Aberdeen. How many of you are familiar with Aberdeen? They have some great stuff out there, particularly in the B2B space. Great resource if you're looking for things, particularly around marketing and sales data. So here's what they have found when they have talked and reviewed best-in-class B2B companies and compared to others. All right, so first thing, 85% of the marketing leads that best-in-class companies produce that are passed on to sales are actioned on. 85%. So I want you to think about your business. Are 85% of your opportunities actioned on, right? For the industry average, it's only about 27%, and for laggards, it's about 5%. So I was having a conversation with a marketing lead in a technology company. He's in India, big global company. And we were having a conversation about how many of the leads that he generates are actioned on. And he's falling in this 5%. And he's concerned about that, understandably so. And he's trying to figure out, how do I fix it? Okay, the second thing we know about this group is that 22% of the best-in-class marketers see a year-over-year increase in marketing's contribution to the pipeline. 22%, only 1% for laggards. And 18% year-over-year rise in marketing's contribution to revenue. Now, I realize that we, as marketers, market to customers, right? When was the last time you guys marketed to a bucket of revenue? Does anybody in here market to a bucket of revenue? Of course not. You have to convert the idea of revenue into which customers in which markets, which is where we're heading right now, right? So when you get a number from your leadership team for next year's revenue, that's meaningless to us as marketers. We have to translate that into something that we can use, and we're going to talk about how we translate that. Okay, so with that, how do best-in-class organizations do it? I want to follow their journey. I want you to see what they do so you can follow in their footsteps. And then if you need a copy of this presentation, let me know, and I'll make sure you get it. Okay, so with that in mind, create a customer-centric opportunity pipeline. That's the first thing they do, is they create a customer-centric opportunity pipeline, and they do it based on the customer's buying process. So I want to say beware. If you're using the waterfall as your primary way of looking at the customer buying journey, you're looking at it from the inside out. And what you need to be able to do when you build a customer-centric buying pipeline is look at it from the outside in, right? So we'll talk about how to do that. Then they overlay the touch points, the channels, and the content on top of that buying process. This is critical. So they don't start with the content and the channels. They start with the customer buying process. And this is one, I think, the biggest reasons why we struggle in the B2B world is because we want to start with the content and the channels first. And we're thinking about that. We create a content calendar. We build out all the different ways we're going to bring that content to the market. But we haven't actually put that in the context of the customer buying process. And so that's really important. And then third, they actually collaboratively work with the sales organization to develop an opportunity scoring model. And I'm going to show you an example of that, right, of what that looks like. So today, a lot of people don't really know how they're scoring their customers. So back to the gentleman from India and his large B2B company, we were having a conversation about how they know to pass leads onto the sales organization. And they offer a free trial. Anybody in here have a company where you offer a free trial or a demo as something as a stopping point along the buying process? Anybody? Because that's fairly common. Great. So they count a free trial as a qualified opportunity that is supposedly sales ready. But if we started dissecting it, what we learned is that maybe a sales-worthy opportunity, but not a sales-ready opportunity. So you may want to think through, what does that mean? All right. So, and lastly, they have very clear performance targets and measures, and they set them in advance. So they start with what are going to be measures of success? What is it we have to actually produce in order to declare success? And then measure against that. So anybody in here familiar with Snuffy Smith? See the comic strip, Snuffy Smith? He's one of my favorite comic strips. And if anyone's familiar with Snuffy Smith, Snuffy and Lookie are best friends. And Snuffy and Lookie, they don't do very much except play cards. They play a lot of cards and go fishing. Spend a lot of time going fishing. And so this is a fishing story. And I think it's really apropos to what we do in marketing. So this is what Lookie is saying to Snuffy as they're heading out to one of their favorite fishing holes. That's a lot of bait, Snuffy. And Snuffy says, today I'm prepared. Some of the fish bite better on worms, some of them seem to prefer crawlers, and some really go for the wigglers. I figured I'd put out a buffet and see what happens. Does that sound like what we might do with marketing? Some of them like certain different kinds of content. We'll put out a buffet and we'll see what happens. Well, we need to be better than that, right? We can't just put out a smorgasbord. It's expensive. That's a very expensive thing to do in marketing. We'll make some video, we'll make some white papers, we'll do some newsletters, we'll do a couple of events. How many of you build a marketing plan that looks like that, right? And we'll put out this buffet, and hopefully people will show up. And the fish will bite. Well, that's not going to work for very long because our budgets will end up getting cut when we take that approach. So in order to be successful, we have to know our customers. We have to know what bait that fish wants. Now, we know that there are some fish who steal our bait and they don't become customers. But we still need to know what's going to bring them to the hook, the right kind of bait. So there are 5 basic customer data categories that will help you know your customer. And this is really important because in order to do what I'm about to share with you well, you have to come from a data perspective. It's not about just experience and intuition. You really need to use data, and I'm going to give you some advice on what kind of data you need, because we're living in a sea of data. And there's an old saying, Bernard Marr, who's with the Performance Institute, a while back once said to me, when it comes to data, you need to know what you want to know. You're going to see that quote again. You need to know what you want to know. So hold on to that thought, because to do that, you have to have access to certain kinds of data. And there's 5. First and foremost is demographic and psychographic data. This is who are our customers. That's back to the fish. What kind of fish is it? Right? What do they buy? What do they, what do they eat? What triggers their purchase? Where do they live? Questions like that. Second, you need to know their spend and financial data. Which customers actually are buying, right? What do they buy? How often do they buy it? These are important things to know, right? Because if you're marketing into the oil and gas industry right now, that's pretty challenging given the situation of the market. So you want to be thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to market to an industry in the United States that is struggling at the moment, right? So we work with a customer in Europe. That's their primary market is the oil and gas industry. They're really being challenged right now in the US market, as understandably so. 96,000 people in the US market have been laid off from the oil and gas industry. What do you think that's doing to their buying process? Understanding who their customers are, right? Okay, interaction and engagement data. How do they interact? When, how often, through which channels? Now you're trying to understand where they like to be engaged. Consumption and usage data. How are they using what they bought? So back to the gentleman in the technology company that has the free demo. I asked him the question, how many people that download the demo actually do go through the demo, actually go through and use it? He didn't have any idea how many of them activated it or how many used it. Kind of need to know that, right? So downloading the demo doesn't mean anything if they haven't activated it and aren't using it. And lastly, relationship data. This is your customer loyalty, customer satisfaction, customer advocacy, your sentiment data from product reviews and all the other things, your Twitter feed, your social media, all fall into this kind of information. All right, so you may not have all this data at your fingertips personally, but a lot of this data exists within your organization. So 5 important customer data categories you want to go take a look at. If you don't know whether you have this information, go do a data audit. Go find out and see if you can organize your data into these 5 categories. Okay, so why do we want to do it? Because having insights into customers are going to allow us to map their buying process. So John's going to come up in a little bit and he's going to talk about account-based marketing. And that's really important. It's a very important thing to be able to do. And mapping the customer buying journey is a process that is associated with that. So let's talk about these 4 benefits. First, our job is to be able to do better customer targeting because we want to reduce waste and we want to accelerate the sales cycle. If you're in the B2B world and you're selling complex products, you'll probably have a long sales cycle. And the CEB recently said that the average B2B product has 5.4 buyers in the buying process. And the more buyers you have, the less likelihood that that transaction is actually going to occur. In fact, if there's more than 5 buyers, you only have like a 31% or 30-something% chance that they're actually going to make a purchase, compared to 1 buyer where you have like an 80-something% chance that they're going to make a purchase. So think about that. Really important from a customer targeting perspective. You have to then develop content, right? So if you're going to develop the content that's going to motivate prospects, whether that's content that tells a story or in some other way compels people to buy, then you need to have insights to know what that content's going to be. And you have to have marketing and sales aligned around a common process and vocabulary. And I'm going to give you a suggestion for what that looks like. And then measurement, process, and tools. So these are the 4 things that you can get from taking this customer-centric approach. Okay, so these best-in-class marketers, the one that Aberdeen was talking about earlier that see all these better results from the work that they do, they're creating value for their customers, right? That's what they focus on. So what does it really mean to be customer-centric? I mean, I can't imagine that anyone in this room doesn't think they or their company isn't customer-centric. I mean, that's one of the key buzzwords that we've been using now for the last several years. Actually, it's been around a very long time. What does it really mean to be customer-centric? What it really means is to think about it, looking at it from the perspective of your customer, right? But more importantly, you have to know what is it they want from you, what's the problem they're trying to solve, what they expect from you, and what is it they can count on you from. So see if you can answer those 3 questions. If you were talking to a customer, could you answer those 3 questions? If you looked at your customer segments, could you answer those 3 questions for those customer segments? Here's what they want from us, here's what they expect from us, and here's what they count on us for. So answer those questions, and that will give you beginnings of telling your story. All right, these best-in-class marketers reverse the value chain. So when you think about this, they start with customer needs and priorities versus what they can build. So a product-centric B2B company is always thinking about the product they're going to build. And that's okay. Maybe that's the way you need to be if you're Intel and you're all about innovation and you're just going to try to move the needle through leapfrogging technology. That's cool. And or maybe Apple, right? All about innovation and getting people excited about that. But even those companies are trying to understand really what the customers are going to need. They identify the customer's preferred channels. What are the channels they want? Do they want it through email? Do they want it through social? Do they want it through face-to-face? Or do they want it through phone? Do they want it through chat? Versus what's easiest and cheapest. So back to this company, this technology company, and talking to my colleague in India, and we were having this conversation, and they do almost all of their marketing using display ads online. Why? Because that's the most affordable thing for them to do. Not because that's the best way for them to connect with their customers, but because for them, that's the fastest, most affordable thing for them to do compared to other things that they might have to do. Determine the touch points that are best suited for the channels, and develop the resources needed to deliver the products and services. So they're thinking about what do I need to actually deliver it versus what is it that is going to I want to be able to use. So what is the resources actually needed? Okay, so with that in mind, I want to show you a way to think differently. A lot of us were raised with the idea of a sales funnel. How many of you here were raised with that notion? The way we sell a sales funnel, right. I'm going to suggest to you that you kill your sales funnel. It's an old, archaic idea, right? In fact, I think it's actually a very dangerous idea. When we've gotten quite bought into the sales funnel, I'm going to suggest to you that what we really want to be able to do with the customer buying journey is understand a pipeline. Customer opportunities come in at the beginning, and they flow through. And our goal is to have as many of the same ones that come through at the end. That's our goal, right? Think about our fish. I mean, do we really want to just go out, throw out a bunch of hooks and bait, and see how many we can actually pull in, and have a whole bunch of them just take our bait, steal it, and walk away? Really? That's what we want to do? We don't want to do that. Or do we want to get a net out, right, and just take whatever comes up? I mean, that is one way to go fishing. But really what we want to do is we want to be thoughtful about the fish we want to bring home, right? We don't want a lot of our bait just stolen, nibbled off the hook. We want to be able to bring home the right fish and the right number of fish. And so we want to think about how do we do that. So I'm going to suggest to you that what you want to think through is your customer engagement pipeline. Customer engagement pipeline. Remember, we're transforming from being in the business of communication to the business of experience. And to be in the business of experience, we have to engage. So there are 6 stages to this engagement. And the cool thing about these 6 stages is they're all behavioral. So when you think about the sales funnel, it's mostly about the way we sell. But when you think about the buying and customer engagement pipeline, it's about the way they engage with us. So the first one is contact. The second is connection. Then comes conversation. Then comes consideration, followed by consumption, and ultimately community. So I'll say that again. Contact, connection, conversation, consideration, consumption, community. So think about that. Anybody in here dating? Anybody dating? I'm on the verge of being married 25 years. Dating has not been in my world for a long time. Anybody else dating? Great, good. So in the old days, 25 years ago, not when we had Match.com, you might have gone to church and somebody there at church would say to someone like me, I got this guy I really want you to meet. And after church, she would take me over to meet this guy, and she would say, here's so-and-so, hope you guys get acquainted, right? Contact made. Maybe I would give him my phone number, or he would give me his phone number. That's just contact, right? Now think about it, the way we market today. We're going along, we have a conversation, he asks me if I'd like to meet him for coffee, or if I'm maybe coming back to church next week, right? We start getting acquainted, and down the road, maybe that leads to a few other things, and then eventually, you know, we have a date, I meet his friends, somewhere down the road, maybe we hold hands, you kiss, you get the idea, right? Think about it. Do you think this guy is going to just sit across the table from me on our very first or second date, plop open a ring and say, would you marry me? I mean, not that many times is that going to happen. But that's what we do when we're marketing to our customers. We think we met them, we think they're ready to buy, and then we ask them if they'll get married, right? So think that through. Understand what are those behaviors. They're not as far along in the buying process in the B2B world as we are in our minds in the selling process. So slow it down, think about the courtship, and think about these stages and what are all the incremental behavioral commitments, think about those dating moments, behavioral commitments that signal to you that they are moving to the next stage. What is that? And you want your content to help them make that move. And you want your channels to help make that move. Okay, so a pipe suggests different marketing programs may be needed at different stages. So how you market at a contact and connection stage is going to be very different than how you market at the connection and consideration stage, right? Targeting and qualification are really important. Customers' buying pipelines suggest that the process is owned by both sales and marketing, right? So that's number one. You have to own it together, so you have to be aligned, and that you have to really focus on behavior. So I want you to keep that in mind, because when we go talk about opportunity scoring, we're going to talk about behavior. Okay, so with that, starting with that, here's kind of a way to think through. In your own mind, what you want to be able to do is map this process for each one of your customer segments, and then for each of the types of buyers. So Katie in a little while is going to talk about personas, right? And you're going to have different personas. So if you're marketing, for example, to a chief financial officer as one of your buyers among those 5 internal stakeholders, there could be a different kind of persona depending in that segment for a financial officer. There might be the visionary CFO or strategic CFO. There might be the bean counter CFO. There might be the risk-averse CFO. You need to know those different personas and figure out how they go through the buying journey and how they map into your segments. So here's how you look at it. Contacts are where you demonstrate interest, right? You exchange maybe cards, maybe email information, something like that. Maybe they complete a website form. Connection. This is where you begin to establish rapport. Maybe you join together on LinkedIn. Maybe they subscribe to a newsletter. Maybe they fan or follow you. Now you're in conversation stage. Mutual dialogue is happening here. Maybe there's email exchanges, right? Maybe there's social media conversations starting to take place, online chats. Consideration. They're beginning to evaluate their options. These are behaviors. So these are ways to understand where they're moving. Here's where they're going to look for references, so your white paper, your case studies, your testimonials, trials, sampling, demos, asking for a spec, like in the semiconductor world, that would be an important time. Maybe giving us a spec might be important. Case studies, RFPs, and so forth and so on. So I wanted to show you an example. This is a real example of a customer's buying journey and the steps that they went through. So if you see here, started with social media, right? They were doing some work. They started with social media, right? They went to a slide share, jumped over to a LinkedIn display ad, right? Jumped then to an industry event where they went to a session presentation. From there, that led them actually to come to the website. So they've done a bunch of things. They haven't really been to the website yet. They're on the website, which leads them to do some registration, ultimately to start an email. They subscribe to the newsletter. Then they do some pay-per-click, some stuff, some more things related to that. They jump to a phone. Now they're ready to actually talk to somebody. So all up in here is kind of in the background. Now finally to have a conversation. Join in on a webinar, right? Come down here and accept a face-to-face event. Jump back over here to another phone conversation. Some more emailing around an RFP and a bunch of other things, and eventually another face-to-face meeting that leads to the actual proposal and product consumption. So if you place that on top, as this company was going through this process, what you see is that they've got them how that weaves around the pipeline, right? So they took those the engagement behaviors, they mapped the buying process, then they looked at what customer was actually doing, and they overlaid it. How many of you have done something in this work, right? 'Cause this is really what you need to do, right? So that's our recommendation to you. is go through this process and see what that looks like. So what's the kinds of content then that works? So here's examples of the kinds of content that might work in those stages just based on the research that we have done and the experience that we have working with B2B companies. We have found that this social media contributed content, conferences, third-party endorsement reviews, things like Gartner studies or Gartner reports, they kind of work more at the contact stage. That's what's going to that's that woman at church who makes that introduction for you. Then you've got connection, the website, the blog posts, newsletters, infographics, email, online chat comes in, assessments, asking someone coming in to do an audit or an assessment or a discovery. Now you're into white papers, websites, web-based events, demos, video, way down here really in the consideration phase, right? Now that doesn't mean there won't be video or usage of access to video or presentations early on. Just think a little bit differently about how you'd want to use your content and your investment. I was just talking with someone earlier about what it takes to make a really good video and how much it really costs. Where do you want to make that investment? Do you want to make that investment down here at the contact stage? I mean, really? You're going to ask the woman you just met at church to go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant before you even had coffee with her? Really? You're going to do that? That's very generous of you, right? So think that through. You probably don't want to put your money that early in the conversation. All right, website, case studies, testimonials, RFPs, newsletters, so forth and so on. That's how you might want to play that out. This is an example. So go back, take a look at your content. Take a look at your buying process. See if you've really got it matched up. Okay, so there's 4 things to keep in mind when you are looking at your content and you're trying to sync it to the buying process. You want it to meet 4 criteria. First, you want it to be relevant. Then you want it to be informative. You want it to be timely, and you want it to be entertaining. So just remember RITE, R-I-T-E. So make sure it's relevant first. That's the most important thing. It has to be informative, even though you do want it to be humanizing and all the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of storytelling. That's important in the way that you make it entertaining. But if there's not any meat to it, it's just fluff, it's not going to be taken seriously. So pipeline approach enables some common definition and metrics. You want to be able to reduce ambiguity. That's the number one thing that you want to be able to do with this pipeline approach. You won't be ambiguous because it's all behavioral in nature. So it won't be any more discussion about whether or not it's a qualified opportunity, a sales qualified, a sales accepted lead, or any of those other things, because you'll be using observable behavioral incremental commitments as a way to actually to look at where the customer is in the buying process. Behavior is pretty unambiguous, right? It clarifies what is a qualified opportunity, what becomes a sales-worthy opportunity versus a sales-ready opportunity, and then it defines where in the stages a customer is going to be and who's going to own that process. So one of the things you want to have a conversation about is who owns what stage. Does marketing own the entire engagement process all the way down? Or do you share it? Where does the handoffs occur? And when you understand the customer buying process, you can begin to establish those connections. Okay, so moving on here, 6 C's. I want to give you an example. This is just a really high-level example of how you might do some scoring using those 6 C's. All right, first, imagine this. You got contact, they complete a registration form, and that's worth some kind of points. You're going to decide together because they've actually done a behavior, they completed a form. Maybe that's worth 0.5 to 1 point for your company. Then they're going to subscribe to your company newsletter. So they're saying, okay, I want some additional contact. That's just another contact stage for this company. Maybe that's worth another point or 2. Right? Now, they come to a third-party sponsored webinar, another company that's having your company present. Right? So now that's worth something. You've got a connection. Maybe that's worth a couple of points. Now you've got another connection. They come to a company session at a conference. Maybe they come to one of your industry conference sessions. When we were in the semiconductor industry and we would go to CES or Comdex way back when, we'd have a session, and that would be part of this connection. Now your connection again, they accept an offer, they download a white paper, for example. So now each one of these are worth some amount of points. They make an introduction to their other stakeholders. Remember, there's 5.4 internal stakeholders on average today in a B2B sale. So the odds are the one person you're talking with isn't the only person you need to be talking with. So now you've got a conversation going on. They give you a product spec, and they tell you what their buying criteria is. Maybe they send that to you by email. Now they request and participate in maybe a live online demo. You're going to walk them through how something works or how it gets done or how the methodology is or how the product performs. They request a face-to-face or a WebEx solution meeting, right? Now we're in consideration phase. Consideration requests might also include getting a reference. So let's talk to one of your customers. And then maybe consumption. They actually purchase a paid trial, and they issue your initial PO, right? There is an example of how you might create an opportunity scoring model. Now, this is based on what the customer is doing. You want to think about your company. What's going to be success for your company? Are they the right fit for your company? So that's the next question. Are they the right size company? So back to the gentleman that I was talking about in the technology company, we're having a conversation in India. I asked him if he had done this kind of opportunity scoring. He hadn't done that yet. But then I started asking questions like, what size company do you want to be doing business with? So today they're mostly in SMEs, right? Small and medium-sized enterprises, and they really want to go to much bigger companies. Okay, that's great. So what size, right? Right titles, didn't have a clue. Wasn't really sure who was going to be the person that they want to talk with. Right market, and then the timing. Are they in the right place in their buying journey? All right, so those are the kinds of things you want to do. Okay, so optimize and improve. Here are some questions to ask. When you're starting to measure, I want you to think in advance. These are the things that you should be counting. How many opportunities did marketing generate compared to all the other opportunities that came into the company, right? How fast do the marketing opportunities convert to customers compared to those other opportunities? These are real numbers to be looking at, as opposed to just, we gave you X number of leads, which may just be names from a trade show. I have no idea what that might mean for you, right? How much are the marketing opportunities worth compared to the other opportunities? Are the ones we generated in marketing worth more, higher value? And how much do the marketing generated deals cost compared to the others? So there's 4 things to take a look at. How many of you are measuring things like that today? Raise your hand. Okay, that's your homework assignment. If you remember nothing else about things you need to measure, here's something that you need to measure. Okay, so wrapping that up, you want to measure your impact in terms of the quality of your opportunities, the quantity, the cost to create them, the value that was generated, the conversion rate, and the win rate. Those are the 5 our 6 key categories. Okay, so with that, it's 6 steps, really quickly, 6 steps to how you get it done. Define the customer buying process at each of incremental behavior. Start there. First thing you do, validate it. Do you have a customer advisory board? If you don't have a customer advisory board, I encourage you to get a customer advisory board. Anybody in here have one? Nope. Yes? Yes? Okay. Another homework assignment. Customer advisory boards, really, really powerful, and they can help you validate this process. Create the buying stages, get them mapped out, get them all behaviorally oriented, determine who owns the stages, who in marketing owns them, who in sales, and where the handoff occurs, right? That's really important. Map the marketing and sales tools for each stage. That's your touch points and your channels, and then go monitor and measure and modify as you need to. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, this is hard work. This is not easy. This is not something that you're going to leave here today and be ready to do on Monday. All done. It's going to take time. Put together a roadmap. Put together your plan. You may need help to get it done. You may need to get some other people inside the company to participate in the process, particularly around the data component, right? So remember what Andrew Carnegie said. Things happen much better when you have teamwork, working towards a common vision, have clarity around what that looks like. So remember that what you're generating isn't revenue, but you're creating new customers, keeping customers, and growing the value of customers. So be clear about how many of those you want, which ones, and where are they. Remember, if you do this well, you will have better insights into your customers. That's a key thing. You know, if sales is going to be the chief revenue officer, then marketing needs to be the chief value creation officer, and that we create value through our customers. That's what we bring to the conversation. We'll have better message continuity. So all that storytelling that we're talking about today and bringing that to life, we'll be able to do this better, and we'll know how to tell the story and what kind of story to tell to which audience. We'll have more effective allocation of our resources because we'll know what content to create and when. We'll have fewer underperformers on the sales team. And this is really important, especially for many companies right now. We'll have higher win rates. I don't know if you guys are doing win-loss analysis, if you are or are not doing that today. That's something that marketing should be leading the charge on, right? So understanding why you win, why you lose. This will allow you to have insight into what you can do to improve your acquisition as well as your retention. And you'll build stronger customer loyalty and equity, which will be greater. One of the key metrics is share of wallet, especially in the B2B world. Okay, so with that in mind, take baby steps. This process can be very daunting. because I'm asking you to kind of step away from things that you might be really comfortable and familiar with doing. So, alignment's really too critical just to say, I don't want to do it because it's hard work. Do it together, right? That's important. Get in the same room, but particularly with your sales counterparts. Do it together. Get your customers in the room with you. Leverage an expert, and start with a blank slate. This is probably the most important thing I'll tell you. Try not to start with way you do it today, but actually with a clean slate, a blank whiteboard, and what it should really look like. Okay, and then my request to you is just do one thing differently. So if you did anybody in here take away one new idea? Raise your hand if you got one new idea. Okay, did you write it down? One thing you're going to do differently? So if you wrote it down, that's awesome, because you'll have a better likelihood. Okay, so that's the end. I think we're right into Q&A. Some resources that you can find on our site that you might find helpful. I'll put them up. So there's a white paper on our site called Don't Waste Your Bullets. It has a very strong Texas flair. So you might enjoy reading that. And it will talk a lot about the pipeline and scoring. There's our ebook, which is on phishing, which you might find fun. And then there's a workbook on how to use the customer buying process for 3 key tools. And one of those is personas. So with that, I think it's time for Q&A. Jen, thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have time for a couple of questions, so I'm just going to get started right away. One of them is when it comes to, you talked about measuring marketing's impact. So what about measuring things like downloads, shares, form submissions?
Those are great. That's a great question. So while we want to measure those things, think about your metrics kind of along a continuum. Right? There's things that are activity, the stuff we do, the number of events we hold, the number of emails we send out, the number of things we post, the outputs, the response rate, the downloads, the shares, the fans, the followers, and then the outcomes. Remember, our job is to find, keep, and grow profitable customers. So that's really the first level of metrics that's meaningful, that's going to resonate with your leadership team. When you have an opportunity to be with the leadership team, you don't want to get into a conversation about fans, followers, downloads. You want to get into a conversation about the number of new customers you've helped bring to the party, how you've helped grow the share of wallet or penetration inside the customer base. That's a conversation the CFO and the CEO wants to have with you. So just be careful about those metrics. Keep them where they belong, down at the bottom of the conversation. Keep that conversation around the real thing you're trying to do in terms of moving a business needle. That's a more important measure, particularly to start with. Okay.
How do you get the most customer data with a limited budget? Is it better to pick one of the customer-centric categories only, or do a small amount of all of them?
Okay, that is a really good question. So I would say it kind of depends. So in answer to the question, where I would start with this question back to your leadership team. What does success, what customers do we have to have by the end of next year or in 18 months to be successful? And if that's one particular segment, for example, or 2, then start with that. If they give you something generic and it's more of a horizontal that says, then you might need a little bit from a lot, right? So really get a clarity so that you're not just burning the midnight oil, so to speak, on data, because otherwise you'll be spinning your wheels. Most of the time when I ask a company, a marketing person side of a company that's not the CMO or VP but further down, what customer segments do you need to secure or grow or acquire? They don't know, right? They're just anywhere. So if you know the answer to that, that will give you a lot of insight into your data.
And one more.
Okay.
How does the content mapping approach change if it's a highly technical sale that is largely spec-driven?
Oh, lovely. Okay, so that's not uncommon. Again, having been in the semiconductor industry for 14 years, that's pretty spec-driven. Mm-hmm. And actually, we found that it didn't particularly change. And I realized that what I'm interpreting, and the person who asked this question, feel free to see me at lunch. I think I'm interpreting that to be sort of like purchasing is driving it, because there's a spec, you're on an approved supplier list, they've got a spec, and they're just asking you to give a quote, right? But that's a really hard way to sell. So you want to be able to find out a little bit more further back in terms of what they're really trying to build, get into that process, understand what the standards are. So it doesn't really change. It's just that oftentimes the people that you had the contact with are in the middle of the mix in the middle, somewhere in the middle of the map, right? So that's a key thing to change. You want to get into that conversation with somebody else earlier.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.